Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Monday, October 9th. Let's see here. So we've got a maintenance notice here that says for the duration of 10 p.m. 2200 to 1:30 in the morning of whatever time zone they're referring to here. The maintenance will be going on, preparing for a new event and new item preparation. In addition, the following data will be removed as an effort to improve server connections, cache server update, rooms, and match history. I assume maybe that means temporary removal, not complete removal permanently, but you know, if it was permanent removal, let's see. How do you even get to match history? Like replay information here as far as saved replays, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if any of these were intentionally saved at all. Probably some of them were, but that's about it. Here we can see if we can look at this person's profile, and can we report somebody's profile for, I mean, this is a kid's game. Profile from here, that really shouldn't be allowed as a name, and yeah, there's just like nothing here you can do. So you can't report people. That's an interesting question. Is like, how do you report people? Is there a way to report people at all? It's just never even occurred to me. Like, be kind of weird. You can block people, and so we could add somebody to a block list if we knew their exact ID. But that's about it. Wow. Okay, well, that's another highlight of how little they've really done with this game as far as just basic support that you would expect to exist in a game. So did I do anything over the weekend? I guess is the question I should ask myself as far as just a catch-up section. Let's open 10 legacy packs. Well, probably not. I probably didn't play any games between Friday's stream and today's stream. I did schedule a lot of YouTube Shorts and reprogram the YouTube Shorts. And so that's pretty much what I've been doing. Just once again, reprogramming things. Now, there's a small excuse I could use here to say it's not 100% my fault, in that Patreon has relaunched itself and so totally changed the layout of their submission page. So that took some extra work, but I mean, that was kind of step 4 or 5. I was working on instead better integration of YouTube clips, YouTube Shorts into Twitch and into YouTube, in that it's going to now grab the release date, if there is a release date, and put that in front of the file name, and then it's going to still need some programming to then undo that and remove the release date converted to a bunch of numbers out of the file name so it's not in the title. Why am I doing this? Because that means when I upload videos, no longer am I uploading videos just based on when I created the YouTube Shorts. I am now uploading videos. I've already done this, so there's no reason to even play this. Based on the release date, which at a certain level that should work very well, because that means if today is October 9th, videos where games come out on October 9th, as far as clips, will come out on on October 9th. Whereas games that come out October 10th will come out probably closer to October 10th. And games that come out, say, December 31st, will be the least prioritized of that batch. It will still be done in batches, certainly, and the batches are going to be 1 or 2 weeks worth of shorts anyways. It's still way too many shorts, but I mean, I really just don't know what to do here. Like, if you can't get quality, go with quantity. Has always been just the default thought on my channel, and it's always proven to not really be that successful. Although, in all fairness, if I really was just doing a ton of editing and trying to make quality videos, it still would probably not have succeeded. And in retrospect, I would be interested in hearing fans' responses if somebody like the Angry Video Game Nerd, who was one of the very first YouTube video game critics for whatever he really was, that he's mostly just a sketch comedian, but if the Angry Video Game Nerd had just uploaded full uncut audio of his gameplay of the NES games, would you enjoy that? Would you like to, in retrospect, want to see that? I think nowadays people would say yes, but I'm not sure he would have become relevant enough or popular enough for the answer to have made it to that yes. Whereas at least on my channel, since it's cut free for the most part, maybe there's been 3 or 4 cuts in 10 years, there's a lot of footage there that in retrospect you can go back and watch. And I don't know if my philosophy is right, only time will tell, but the idea of having ownership of certain styles of content, certain types of content, I think still makes a lot of sense. So when I'm making YouTube shorts around games that nobody else is going to talk about, if somebody 10 years from now searches for that game, they may get my YouTube video, and that's that longevity hope, certainly. And in the same idea, there's definitely a question as to whether if 10 years from now somebody wants to see, say, gameplay of Res Infinite, my channel's footage of Res Infinite may be the best channel's version of Res Infinite footage because it's all the way through and thorough, not just a clipped up version showing one boss battle or one level. Outside of programming, though, I guess I really didn't do that much. I still have a little bit of programming left to do. I've realized that if I make the small sacrifice of 1 pixel on the left or right of the YouTube shorts, I could probably convince YouTube to do a better job of displaying them on what am I doing? Yeah, on desktop in widescreen mode, because there's like a lack of a black border, so I'm gonna try and experiment with that and see if that works. I also would like to take another stab at trying to get adult games, not adult games, but rated in for mature by ESRB games showing when I make YouTube shorts, because they're going to be a fly in the ointment, certainly very often. And that right now I just get stuck at the age gate, and if I can find a way to get OBS's web page source to get past that age gate, that would be great. Although I'm not 100% sure there actually is a way. If you could have Selenium or UI Vision running in OBS, I could do it. And that would be interesting to potentially port all of my UI Vision Selenium based macros in OBS itself, but I seriously doubt I could do that. I could certainly ask OBS, but I don't think OBS has enough programmers to try to integrate it. The best hope is going to be that I've learned more about the XPath CSS HTML5 object location system that I can use that. But there is a high chance that that is going to fail. I'm also toying with using ChatGPT to just program an Arduino sketch for me. Like, I'm in a weird off point there where it's like, yes, I enjoy programming to a certain extent, mostly. I can get frustrated with it after 3 or 4 days straight of mostly doing nothing but programming or not making any real progress. But I also just don't really have time, nor is it, in this case, even something that I would really care to have done perfectly or anything like that. So just handing over the work to a computer is that future, is that promise that computers and automation always makes. So maybe I should save myself the effort and the energy and at least start with a sketch written by ChatGPT, and if it works, it's good. If it doesn't, then I'll jump in and start doing the debugging at that point. In particular, all the sketches needs to do is integrate 3 simplistic programs into itself. And it needs to have a Wi-Fi connection, which both means it needs to be able to connect to a Wi-Fi service through the WPA supplicant file strategy, hopefully, to connect to my Wi-Fi. And then it needs a way of adjusting its settings from default or from reset. So it needs it to make its own Wi-Fi access point temporarily. And it needs a way to convert back to that mode if necessary. And then from the Wi-Fi setup and the connection to the Wi-Fi, it just needs to then turn on a circuit, an LED, basically, when it connects to OBS through WebSocket. So it's just 2 or 3 really complicated, but there are already example sketches and libraries to help you. Networking things to do one simple thing, and this is all just to add some smarts to an on-air light. Like, I can get an on-air sign on Amazon, and Amazon Prime Day starts tomorrow, and almost certainly I will get an on-air light, although that is there is a huge question as far as just how much really will be on sale and how many projects I really want to engage with due to this Amazon. They're calling it the big deal sale now, which is a smart move, honestly, because it was getting ridiculous that they were basically having 2 Prime Day sales. The Prime Day sale has already happened this year. But they are also still being very ridiculous in the sense that they're having a Prime Day sale, a Big Day sale, and there still will be pushes for Black Friday, Christmas era sales. Meanwhile, everything I spend buying non-video game stuff comes out of the budget as far as buying Steam stuff and potentially pulling the trigger to get the Steam Deck TV if that actually gets announced and isn't just a leaked rumor. I'm seeing increased success around the Raspberry Pi 5 and emulation. I'm seeing like Wii games, PlayStation 2 games. It does feel like if RetroPie embraces the Raspberry Pi 5 and everything gets optimized really well, or if people abandon RetroPie in favor of just running emulators directly on the desktop, the Raspberry Pi 5 is adding at least 3, I would say, new systems as being viable. Now, weirdly, it may still be a case that several, if not a lot, of the Nintendo 64 games don't quite run perfectly, but they may just leap over that for better emulation and smooth running of PlayStation 1 or other even newer Nintendo systems, like GameCube systems, for instance. So, yeah, it does make a different argument, but the weird thing here, I would say, is if you have built a RetroPie, you probably shouldn't build another RetroPie. You probably should still just invest in a Steam Deck. Unless it is really just a case of finances, which maybe it is for a lot of people going to be a case of finances, because a RetroPie would probably still be about $150. You'll pay $80 for the Raspberry Pi 5, but then you have to add a plug and a cooler, which probably is even more, $80 for the good amount of RAM, the bigger amount of RAM, which I would probably suggest, even though if game emulation may not really need it. But then once you start to add a case and controllers and things like that, you're just ever increasing the cost of a RetroPie. So the real cost is probably much closer to $150 all in all. You also are getting into the aspect, certainly, that RetroPie is going to use ROMs, whereas Steam Deck could have ROMs on it, but Steam Deck also lets you play more modern games, so it's really not an apples-to-apples comparison. But yeah, I definitely could see, if you've never made a RetroPie, if you've always wanted to make make a RetroPie. I could see in the next 6 months it making a lot of sense to do that with the Raspberry Pi 5. But then you have also the other weird situation where there's not much of another project to suggest other than just having a desktop PC, like, or a secondary desktop PC, which in my case I could see almost doing that. Like, you would pay more for like a KVM switch than you would overall to have a Raspberry Pi 5 desktop, and I kind of only need that if I could get my macros to be 100% robust, and they're not that way. There's definitely something that just always goes wrong. There's a lot of wait for the pages to load. Like in most of the web pages when I'm scheduling it, when you click on something and it pops up a little window but doesn't actually change the page, that is still considered a page load event, and you kind of need to wait for it to happen, otherwise you're going to get out of place and it's going to crash or bug out in some unknown way. So yeah, even when I am scheduling, even if I'm trying to tweak it as best as possible to be as robust as possible, it's just not really going to work. It just doesn't work. So yeah, the hope is to spend very little on tomorrow, Prime Day sales. Maybe nothing at all, really. Although there is some stuff I want to get, and there's kind of no reason to put it off after the sales happened. There definitely are things, and this is the trick as far as shopping, which becoming an expert at shopping is a career in itself, and it only really helps you if you can afford to buy things in the first place. If you're living literally to paycheck to paycheck and just broke all the time, then the poor pay more for most things, because they don't have time and they don't have energy to shop around for discounts, and they don't have extra cash to buy something when it's on sale versus buying something at the absolute last second when something breaks. A lot of people do have money to buy things but live in a poor mentality, and in living in that poor mentality, it actually hurts them in a lot of scenarios, because they're just ruining their own emotional stability. It's not mentally healthy to always think that you're completely broke and have that stress, but if you're always saying you can't afford things, like you can't afford a new car, well, eventually you have a 30-40-year-old car that is so worn out and so broken that you're either paying for a few extra repair jobs to fix a car that you really shouldn't have, versus just buying a new one. Not a brand new one, but a new used car. It's also certainly a difference if you are poor, if you have the poor mentality and you use that to save, but most people can't or don't save even though they say they're broke or poor. So yeah. No, this is destroying our trap card. Oh yeah, I was gonna give a trick here. I've realized. Thing I've realized about the Prime Day sales is what you want to do, for the most part, is look for things that are pretty practical. Trying to find a specific model of a TV or something like that is not really going to work, but you could search for TVs by typing in like 60-inch, 55-inch TV, and then usually on the front page down in the middle they'll offer you a way to create an alert for similar products to that size TV. And these alerts may help you. Of course, you may also end up with the alerts sticking around later longer than you want, and you'll have to go and delete them later. Put specific items in your wish cart, whether practical or not. Put them in your shopping cart, click save for later, or just leave them in the cart. And then you'll have a message at the top of the cart that says the price has changed for items in your cart. And particularly do that a couple of weeks before a sale happens, and you'll notice that some things may very well drastically increase in price. The smart ceiling fan, for instance, that I bought, it wouldn't hurt to buy another one of those, but I don't think I'll do that. It jumped from being $150 to $350, and then jumped down a few days later to being $150 again. Now, they try and obfuscate that by pushing for the lowest price in 30 days marker on some item listings on Amazon, but I don't know if the sellers and listers have figured out that trick yet. So if they go back 30 days, of course you want everything to look like it's actually on sale. So camel is going to be your major friend to copy every URL into that website to track its price history for real. That try to be more stringent about not engaging with products that don't have a price history. But yeah, it's clothing, it's kitchenware, it's books, heavily things like that are going to go on sale. You're not going to find a huge number of video games that are new games or interesting games. You might find some older video games. It's a shame that there really isn't a giveaway or anything that's really happening in the whole process. You would think that would encourage a lot more people to come and check things out if there was a chance of putting things in your cart would give you a discount or give you everything in your cart for free if you're a random selected winner. Amazon's really promotes their own devices, so if you wanted a Kindle, if you wanted an Echo device, yes, those will be slightly on sale. But for the past, ever since it's been created, they've really failed to make it feel like it's anything special. That being said, it is really just crabs in the bucket, pulling everybody down as far as sales go, because it's not like Walmart or Walmart.com has good sales. I don't know if Walmart.com has any sales at all. It's not like Borders, if they even exist as a bookstore, or any other bookstore has sales of any real importance. There was a point, definitely, where Borders was emailing me a lot of sales. But even then, I don't know if I was really saving anything. Best Buy, yeah, I don't think they really had sales either. Like, Steam really is the only place that has really, really good sales, and they can get away with that because they are they are selling digital goods and don't have to deal with shipping or anything like potentially warehousing or like delays or returns or things like that. I guess technically Steam still deals with returns. I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon.com, assuming it doesn't just get sued and Jeff Bezos doesn't leave or something like that. Whereas, honestly, if Jeff Bezos left and somebody else was in charge, it would be interesting to see if things got changed a little bit. But that they're pushing for more and more sales around the year would make sense if they are going to just straight up say, hey, during July 4th area, we're going to have all mattresses on sale. All participating sellers putting mattresses on sale. And this is just going to be the de facto place where mattresses get sold. And then having a specific sale for a specific even category, I think would be helpful. That was probably the wrong one to get, wasn't it? Alright, well, let's correct that mistake. Toss this one. Honestly, this might have been the exact right one to have gotten. And then activate this. And toss this. Put this up here. I guess the question is, can I get a one-turn kill here? That's my thought. Can I get a one-turn kill? I don't know what daily quests I even need to do, so I guess we'll just do all of this. This one first. Then this one second. And this one third. Go ahead and activate this effect. going to play that face-up card. Do this. Then we're gonna special summon this one. And guess we're gonna get rid of this. Then we'll guess we're gonna summon this. Yeah, it's not quite a one-turn kill, is it? But it is a pretty big success. Well, I guess I really don't have too much to say, honestly, since I have just been taking it fairly easy. Still playing on my phone. I'm questioning whether there's a real value in playing Seven Mortal Sins Ecstasy on my phone, since the version you install, at least from the Steam store, is censored, but they have this weird middle step as far as an adult game, in that it's lewd, not nude, so therefore it tries to go much more into like adult themes, which it all just kind of comes off a little bit too much like a tease, and frankly it's just a little bit of an overwhelming game. That being said, the other games I'm still playing, like Memento Mori, I'm really struggling on a day-to-day basis to make even a small bit of progress. I really capped out at that level, and I think that's very intentional. I question in the long run if Memento Mori actually has too slow of development for the type of game it is, and it really doesn't have that many characters, and it overemphasizes each character as being very special, which is nice, certainly, and each character having their own theme song effectively is great, but I think that may very well be the reason why there is slow development for it. And to counter that, they make enemies very, very strong, and they have you level up your enemies not by getting stronger enemy companions or to fight for you, but by having to constantly upgrade kind of boring looking armor on the enemies. Still playing lower decks. That too does bring the pass out. There's really nothing you can do unless you're just wanting to pay to win and skip forward, and there's really no reason to do that, because you're just gonna hit the latest bit of content and then you'll have nothing to do. And then I'm still playing Tinka Fuma, which is the only game that you actually have to go to a Hero Labs to install as an adult game. And its problem is because is almost the exact opposite of Seven Mortal Sins, and that it is just nude, not lewd, and it has a stamina system that's limiting me somewhat too. Although it does have a lot of events, so Tinka Fuma feels like it's still getting a lot more active support. So, yeah. Inherently, I have 4 different games that I'm jumping around through day to day, when I should just be playing Steam games, PC games, and making content instead of playing on my phone. Which that definitely is taking up a lot of my time. But honestly, too, I probably need it. I'm not gonna say I'm severely burnt out or anything, but like playing Res Infinite, I definitely felt like I should have had a little bit more fun playing Res Infinite, and that I should have been more into playing Res Infinite, and I just really wasn't. I had some wonkiness and that happened. I don't know if I really call it stuttering or micro stuttering or anything in Res Infinite. Maybe that intention was my own fault for turning up the graphics higher than the NVIDIA GeForce had set it to, which honestly I should just trust whatever NVIDIA GeForce sets it to and stop turning it up higher, which I think I've done for the past couple of games, particularly if there is just a blazing edge that I'm pushing the RAM and CPU at, as far as just XMP overclocking on the RAM speed. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the wonkiness I ran into Res Infinite though had one of these situations may have been graphics, but the other one I think very possibly is a bug. Yeah, I like Res Infinite as a cultural piece, but the way they packaged Res Infinite in particular to resell Res was pretty awful. It's just like they went down the book of everything not to do when trying to resell a game by not really adding any content that is new and separate from the main game, and then creating modes to play the main game multiple times while not integrating those modes into the main experience. So yes, I found it very frustrating that they would have like 8 different direct assault modes and requirements to play the game for 10 hours when you're not likely to play it for even 5 to unlock things. And certainly these Steam achievements are in line with that thought also, because very, very few people did do that. I guess the real question though is, am I really rejuvenating myself by playing on the phone a game, or am I just burning myself out by playing games on my phone? Maybe I need to do something completely different, which I do need to do a Lego set, and that is something completely different, and I do need to build my server rack, which that's more of a physical thing. I'm just waiting until I can afford to potentially hurt myself in the process. This guy's just countering everything. For not really good reason. Yes, he managed to counter all my strategies, but unless this one trap here can rejuvenate his hands. Yeah. Let's go ahead and put this down here. I don't even know if there is a card that says draw as many cards as your opponent has. There probably is. So me having none and him having none might be interesting. See what this does. One interesting thing I have seen on sale pre Prime Day sale is Hero Quest, which is a board game version of trying to do something Dungeons and Dragons. But even on sale, it comes with so many plastic pieces and such that you're paying like $80 for it. It's a really, really expensive thing. Although, in all fairness, if you were going to do Dungeons and Dragons, just a standard couple character sheets and a Dungeon Master shield and a playbook and the instruction books, the monster manual, things like that, are going to push you way, way further than $80. And you'd have to buy so many things separately that you may very well not know what to buy as far as Dungeons and Dragons. I'd also argue, though, that people who play Hero Quest are only going to play it for, say, 12 hours, not months and months, if not years and years, coming back to your same campaign in Dungeons and Dragons on a weekly basis or fairly frequent basis. See if we can play this quickly. Not going to be able to do too much here. This is the first turn, so we'll end up with the face-up destroyer. Just ever so slight strategies. I'm feeling very laid back today, you know? And I don't know if that's really good for being a YouTube content creator, but it's probably just better in general. I think today is also like Christopher Columbus Day or something. October 9th or some kind of holiday. And certainly there's other things going on in the news that aren't video game related that I'm intentionally not mentioning. If we did that, and then we did that, let's wait till next turn though. But yeah, does just feel kind of laid back and relaxed, which is fine by me, I guess, today. So I think it's probably, let's go ahead and activate this. It's probably worth it to just consider this the last turn. Like ending 10 minutes early wouldn't be a big deal, and just focusing in on the news. The big news, I guess, is that the latest Steam Next Fest is launched with hundreds of game demos. A week-long digital event is running until October 16th. Now, noticeably here, I guess the question is, should I make a bunch of YouTube Shorts extra, considering how a lot of my YouTube Shorts from the Summer Games Fest got a decent amount of views? The bigger amount of hype, I guess, that Valve And Steam crates helped me get better views. I also went in here and could not figure out what was causing the bug, the crash that would occasionally happen. And so I just opted to block the bug when it happens. It may very well be an ad blocking issue. Like, I disabled everything as far as ad blocking in Firefox, but my router may be doing ad blocking too, and it is definitely encrypting the DNS, and maybe that's where it's creating problems. So yeah, at some level here, I could try and make YouTube shorts around all of these. A lot of these games are either known or should be known. These are all fairly big games, and it doesn't seem to me like there's anything else really happening here as far as Steam goes. Entanglement. Just a lot of streams, a lot of stuff. Several different categories here. Recommended things. I watched the whole video as far as algorithmic suggestions versus curated suggestions. There definitely is a bit of a lie. I sort of watched the video. I didn't actually listen to it. I watched it with the subtitles on, and so obviously I turned my eyes off of it and got distracted and skipped around a little bit. So I ADD watched the video describing how games are shown and curated and depicted in different places on the Steam store. But there's an inherent underlying lie in that Valve is the people in charge of Steam are the people also making the algorithm. So at any point they can make algorithmic changes to say, weight this kind of game heavily in a positive, or weight this kind of game negatively and so it doesn't get shown. And they can just do that for lots of games instead of individual games. Anytime you say curation, you might as well just replace it with censorship, because the two are effectively the same when you're talking about products that should be available for end users, consumers, gamers to buy. And even if you're saying algorithmic instead of curation, well, the algorithm is also still curating, still censoring at some level. It's not until you get to very testable results to say, hey, show me the top 100 games, or show me the top games in this category, top 100 games in a specific category or with a specific tag. Even the tag system is a huge mess, because this guy just stopped playing, I guess hoping that I would concede or get bored. Little did he know that I was bored, but also doing something else. So we're gonna need 5 more wins to get the gold, tier 1, then 5 more wins after that to get the platinum. The danger certainly here is that a new event will pop up and take up all of my time. You know what I think I'll do here is I'll come in here and start Duel Live for one game, just in case the daily quest resets. But I'm not going to show it, per se. So we'll just hear it playing in the background. Uh, the algorithmic level here clearly is not that censored or curated. And if anything, I would say the censorship and the curation in general on Steam is whether a game gets allowed on Steam in the first place or not. But there definitely are just straight up adult content visual novels being advertised here. But also it's worth pointing out that if you don't by default ask new people making accounts, or ask even the old people who have Steam accounts whether they want to see the adult content, then they are going to be opted in. People are by default opted in not to see adult content at all. So I'm only seeing those adult visual novels because I know where the settings is and in the account settings of Steam, and I've gone and clicked the box to show me adult content. And that still doesn't even work because there's still almost certainly games that are not labeling themselves correctly. The whole tag system is another system that is just very poorly designed, in that you have user tags and publisher tags, and publishers lie and users lie, and there's just no real agreement on the tags in general. I think we probably are at a point where if every single game's screenshots were fed into a good artificial intelligence generator, they could spit out better tags just by looking at the looking at the screenshots or playing the game even. There might be a real good argument to limit the number of tags any individual game could have, to say, hey, you can have 3 tags and that's at most. So is your game an action or an adventure or a simulation? It can have multiple elements, but the main element you're going to have to pick there. Because clearly there's a lot of tag stuffing that happens on games. There's a lot of games that straight up are designed from the bottom up to have a bunch of description elements. RPG in general should probably not be a tag, since almost every game has an RPG element to it. Whereas very few games are actively what you would say role-playing games first and foremost. In fact, I don't know of even a good example of something where you're playing a role-playing game. Okay. The playback fast enough there. That's annoying audio-wise. Yeah, we'll go ahead and replay here. It's fairly ridiculous that Bandai even cares about the Duel Live things at this point. It feels like they could give more gems for something else, just the daily login, and get rid of Duel Live. Or they should just do something with it to make it make more sense, because you're just not really learning anything through the process of watching other people play, because everybody's playing weird strategies. Looking at all these categories though, and this is almost certainly just a small sampling, there's really too many games, and they all just have that coming soon issue. Anyways, if my macro is working correctly, all of these games should be caught if they're new listings anyways. So I'll have a massive amount of YouTube shorts anyways. So going out of my way to do with the Steam Next Fest seems unnecessary. The real disappointment here, though, so far, unless they sneak it out, was the hope that they would have announced the Steam Deck TV as being something in development. But yeah, if they're not gonna do it now, they may do it in a fall sale. And this Next Fest is kind of pushing demos at the moment. It's weird how Valve and Steam have really created this system where they're saying, check out these demos this week, and then in 2 weeks we're going to hope you come back and actually buy games. It's an interesting split, to say the least, but it kind of makes some sense too. Is that Valve is overrun by an unmanageable amount of demos, but it wants demos, certainly, and that makes a lot of sense. And Valve is overrun by games in general, and games going on sale, and it wants sales, obviously. I have seen this top one in each of the categories as far as recommended for you, so I would assume that this recommended for you is of a smaller sub-selection of games. That being said, Kaiju Princess here is tagged with mature content and nudity, so can't really say there's a lot of censorship going on this sales store. Not once you've got the box clicked. The only thing I would say is there's art styles that are still being censored. Like a game like this TV here probably would have problems if it had any adult content in it. Whereas a game like Astra, here's art style would probably be more acceptable. This is the art style that Memento Mori kind of has. This, I'm almost tempted to call it Final Fantasy art style. It's a bad description. I'd say it's almost like pencil sketch style, not being digitally painted in as much. Yeah. But yeah, nothing super interesting around the Next Fest as far as that. GameDeveloper.com says Lord of the Rings Golem developers allege hostile war culture. Current Next Daedalic staff claimed that the Lord of the Rings Golem suffered from a lack of funding and toxic work environment from upper management. Well, this is also a German company, so I wonder if that means you should give it more or less credibility. You almost certainly have to assume it to be true. Like, you don't have that terrible of a game with, at some level, the upper management not supporting you. Now, what do they mean by upper management is the question, though. Do they mean Daedalic's upper management, or do they mean Tencent? Because I believe it was Tencent that purchased them. The toxicity allegedly came from the CEO and founder, Kortsen Fichtelmann, and CEO Stefan Harms. Employees claim the studio had a atmosphere fear which streamed from the pair's presence, who would shout at staff, and things were so hostile that workers would whisper out of fear of being overheard. Well, honestly, shouting at people is so low on the bar of what a bad boss could do these days. It's questionable whether you're not really just stretching it. But also, you're going to make these kinds of claims in the hopes that you can sue the company now that you're unemployed, which it's a shame that is the system, really. And this is yet another thing that, if I can make a pitch for universal basic income, might fix. If all of a sudden people just quit their jobs way before there was any major dislike of your job, just because it's like, yeah, this is no longer fun, this is no longer something I want to work on, this is not a project that I want to be involved with, I'm just going to go ahead and quit and take universal basic income, or have the money that I've been getting from UBI this whole time anyways, which, yeah, at a certain point UBI would be paying even employed people a small amount of money. It creates this situation where bosses have to walk on eggshells, or they'll lose their employees, or they'll lose employees who are just whiners, which makes it easier for all the other employees. If you work long enough, you know that whiners really suck, and if you work long enough, you may find yourself turning into the whiner. So yeah, shouting's nowhere as bad as some of the other stories we've heard of other people. Crunch without pay is illegal. Junior staff and interns working on anything. I don't know what the laws in Germany are, but technically in the United States, interns are not supposed to be working on anything that would benefit the company at all. It's supposed to be 100% for the benefit of the interns, that they're given special projects made specifically for them that cannot be sold or benefit the company. They shouldn't just be doing the work of what staff should be doing. There is another story here too that claims there's allegedly a rumor here that the apology Twitter picture that they put out for Lord of the Rings Gollum was written by ChatGPT, which on the surface I could see why people are upset about that, but when you really start to dive down into it, I'm not sure if I can really agree with people being upset with it, because on one hand I can see how ChatGPT may actually be very good at making people better at speaking to other humans and saying the right thing. Humans have this emotional element here where you speak your mind or let slip what you really think, when you really should be more political and polite. Political in the sense of politeness, not in the sense of politics. But yeah, being more polite, being more cautious with your words is something that a computer could do a lot better. I know this for a fact because when I had ChatGPT rewrite my chat rules, I was extremely satisfied with the new way it rewrote things. It made it easier to read, easier to understand, and it added a level of politeness that I didn't even ask for it to do. In the last sentence there, let's communicate positively and constructively. I didn't in any way, to my knowledge, indicate that that's something I wanted, and it gave it to me, and I'm like, oh, that works. That works really well. Now, I will say the chat decorum doesn't actually work. Just the last stream, somebody posted, and I ignored them on the chat. Will I duel them? Which, yeah, there's just nothing is going to stop those people. Frankly, the people that are asking to duel me are not reading the rules in the first place. Otherwise, they would get past the point where it says be respectful and avoid initiating game challenges. Like that's before the first comma, even. It's the first line. So people that are putting challenges out, I know are not following the decorum. At a certain level, if I had a moderator and I had a ton of people in the chat, I would probably have the moderator time out people like that, if not block them completely, depending on how big a deal it is. Because if you can't read the rules, then you're just not going to follow the rules, so you might as well just be considered a threat and kicked out in the first place. But yeah, so I really don't have that big of a deal of somebody using ChatGPT to write a apology note when you're already, in particular in the case of Daedalic and video game companies in general, no, they're not really sorry. I mean, at a certain level, a kid can be sorry for breaking a toy because they accidentally broke it. But can a $1 million company be sorry that they made hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions to put out a garbage game? No, they can't be sorry. This is a clear, by the time a game is released, a clear line of decisions and behaviors were decided. You cannot come back and say you're sorry or you were surprised or that it was an accident. I don't, I guess, in general, believe in the idea of being sorry for something that you've planned and prepared for months and months and months. You're not, particularly corporations, are not real people. They're not going to have a change of heart. They're not going to be visited by the ghosts of Christmas past and be sorry for that reason. They totally planned to put out Lord of the Rings Golem in the state that they put it out. Maybe they ran out of money, but they didn't apologize until people started complaining about the quality. Yeah. So, apologies really don't mean anything anyways as far as game companies go. So, if they're just going to have ChatGPT do it, it means very little. If anything, I think we may be slightly better off if all of a sudden all of your social media coordinator positions, which are sort of made up positions for a new generation of Gen Z, Gen X, unskilled labor people. But yeah, if all the social media people running Twitter accounts started to get replaced by just chatbots and ChatGPT people, it would probably be just as good. Really. Larry Orb put out an interesting tweet an hour ago saying that the team at 343 has done a great job working on Infinite and empowering the community. My recent fave is the Small Hollow map. And so he's retweeting Halo Infinite Season 5 Reckoning launching October 17th, which is interesting because this is an odd choice here that he's going back to tweeting about video games, where here he says he's been quiet on social for a few months, says he took the summer to be with his family, and then my mom suddenly passed away as well, but I'm starting to reemerge, so I'll get more chatty here and now that we are in the fall. So how's it going? Which honestly, he wasn't fully quiet, but he kind of stopped talking about games for at least a month or so, and then he started doing it again. So I think Larry Herb is probably still has a passion for video games. Which at a certain level, maybe that is the question to ask as far as whether or not the new guy replacing Larry Herb has the same passion for video games, or instead has more just a passion for acquisitions and mergers and making deals, or proposing deals that really wouldn't work as well. And honestly, I guess he only went quiet for a small amount of time. Yeah. I don't know if it was really even 2 months. But yeah. So I will continue to keep an eye on Major Nelson's Twitter and to see if there's anything there, as long as Twitter still works as a service. Otherwise, I don't know what people would move on to. I saw what was almost certainly a scam on my personal Facebook, where somebody had posted to one of the groups I follow that they were giving away a PS5 because their daughter died of lung cancer. And for a brief moment there, I thought, maybe I should see if this is real. But I eventually determined or decided that it's almost certainly a scam, because it's a well-known scam anyways. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense either. It didn't make a lot of sense in the group that they posted in, other than it was a Destiny Child group, which with the shutdown of Destiny Child, I assume people thought wouldn't be moderated. Destiny Child, the Android mobile game, which has now been ended. Yeah, and if you were going to give away a PS5, you could almost certainly find somebody outside of just a random group of people. What I think more than likely happens in those cases too is that people's accounts get hacked, and so it looks like a fairly legitimate account. May look like somebody who is somewhat close to you physically, so it just seems more reasonable. And I assume that the scam is that people are going to say they're giving it away for free, but then they're going to say they need the shipping first. And yeah, I did a few days later think maybe I should try and scam the scammer there and say like I'm a fraud division sergeant, and that I'd like to receive it, and that I would ship him shipping through something like Zelle only after the product has been fully received, and I would only ship him a certain amount of money, like $50. $50 for shipping would be more than enough, even for a PS5. But there might even be other scams there too. It might be a psychopath. It might be somebody who's then going to target your house. You kind of need a PO box. You kind of need to rethink the whole thing, and it's just a lot of wasted time. If you want to be hopeful to win something, go with Publishers Clearinghouse. You know the scam there, at least. They're going to show you a crap ton of ads for a bunch of crap products as seen on TV products, and then they're going to put you in giveaways that do not draw winners anywhere as often as they may imply, or a lot of giveaways that are likely to only pay out $500 to $500, even though they have grand prize amounts that are much higher. You would have, there's just way too low of an odds that anybody in the world would win the grand prize. But yeah, there's no initial investment there, just wasting your time and looking at ads. And if you have an ad blocker, that works really well, it's not even that big of a deal. There is something also certainly appealing with some of the giveaways that Publishers Clearinghouse does, of giving several $1,000s a month or a week for the rest of your life, instead of giving a massive payout at the front, locking people into the idea of just taking a little bit each week can be a great way of avoiding other people trying to borrow money from you, which is always a major problem if you did win. Anyways, I'm supposed to be talking about video games, and instead I'm just kind of rambling here. It does feel like it is a very laid-back day. I bet fall and just the lower humidity, less heat in general is probably going to lead to more days like this anyways. Masahiro Sakurai is teasing a collaboration with an unknown YouTube channel. Smash Bros. Director says he'll be playing other games with a well-known YouTube channel. Masahiro Sakurai is one of these Asian guys that arguably has too much work done. This is not the natural face of anyone. It's almost to a point where I wouldn't be surprised if he, in his own private life, might cross-dress or be transgendered, which the understanding of transgenderedness in general by Japanese people, I think, is fairly fairly small, and so that tends to create weird situations. The thing here, though, is if he's going to collaborate with a well-known YouTube channel, he could collaborate with PewDiePie because PewDiePie is in Japan. He could collaborate with some of the other well-known Japanese, some of the other well-known English-speaking foreigners living in Japan, like abroad in Japan, or one of the Trash Taste characters, Trash Taste podcast, but they're more anime YouTubers, not video gamers per se. Sea Dog, I guess, maybe games a little bit, but I just doubt that that's really the case. If it's not PewDiePie, then it's almost certainly going to be a Japanese YouTuber who really won't be that well known outside of Japan. Japanese YouTubers, from what I hear, do a very different thing, and just, I imagine, aren't going to speak in English, and I don't think Masahiro Sakurai is going to speak in English, which leans towards the idea of it being a Japanese YouTuber. There's a real danger, certainly if you go with even PewDiePie, that he'll get canceled for some reason, or argued against something for some reason. Dr. Disrespect and things like that would probably be a huge mistake. I wouldn't be surprised if it is a Vocaloid anime avatar type YouTuber and he's just collaborating. What does he even mean by collaborating in general? Does that mean they're going to be talking about Smash and doing an interview question and answer session, or are they going to be playing Smash with each other, or are they going to be working on something completely different? Like, it potentially could open the door to him just working with some kind of J-pop group or some music creator group of some sort, musical creator YouTuber, and working on some completely different style project. Yeah, you could even take this speculation, which it is just going to be baseless speculation, to say maybe he's going to work with the guy who made Bayonetta, who just left Platinum Games. Maybe the two of them are going to collaborate on a YouTube project. Like, his new YouTube channel is game designing tips, which that implies that this is more of an educational top level. This is how I created the general concepts. I bet he doesn't get into details and the weeds of programming games. The full quote here, I guess, gives you some more detail. Since my YouTube debut, many have expressed interest in watching me play other games. Well, you'll soon have your chance, because Masahiro Sakurai on Creating Games is planning a special crossover with a well-known YouTube channel. Stay tuned for more details. Although I would question if the creator of Bayonetta has a YouTube channel. It's a little weird even for Masahiro Sakurai to have a YouTube channel, because I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo is super secretly peeved at Masahiro Sakurai doing anything at all other than working on Smash Brothers and working for Nintendo, and they almost certainly don't want even their high level employees to have side projects or moonlight, was the old phrase. It'll be interesting to see what the reveal here is, but almost certainly it's not going to be much of anything. Starfield has a latest update, which has added a field of view slider. The patch also includes performance and stability improvements, but in general, I just don't think very many people are enjoying the main storyline of Starfield, and I think it's really past the point of caring about Starfield. I think Bethesda in particular dropped the ball with Starfield in that they could have experimented a lot more, and they didn't, and so they've created what is just a worse version of Skyrim in space with possibly better graphics, and that's it. It makes a very poor argument for Starfield 2 to ever be made. I did hear a story about how Bethesda was nearly on the verge of bankruptcy, and when they came out with Morrowind, and that's really what saved the company. So maybe that level of desperation would help Bethesda. Unfortunately, Bethesda will never be in that situation again, not unless Microsoft's on the verge of bankruptcy or they split off Bethesda. At best case scenario, I could see Microsoft just laying off a lot of management at ZeniMax and Bethesda and leaning the team down into a smaller, more tactical strike force of programmers and developers. But even in that, I think you need new blood with new ideas. Particularly, that's what Starfield needed. Starblood. That's an interesting title for a potential video game. Or a death metal album. But, yeah. Another story I saw about Starfield, as somebody who's anywhere close to even playing Starfield. Apparently you can add a med bay to your ship, but then you can't use the med bay to heal yourself, which seems really crazy, because you could add a medical bay in Skyrim and use it to heal yourself. So, like, yeah. Or Fallout 3 even. Yeah, so they're actually going backwards as far as features, not forwards. I guess you can't have children in Starfield either. I don't know if there's even children models in the game. But, so that's another thing Starfield seems to miss. Redfall game update 2 has some release notes. Let's see, adding more content, not really, but adding some improvements allegedly. It's probably too little too late. It's almost certainly too little too late at this point. Yeah. As far as Bethesda goes. Why did that take me to... I don't even know what this is. Felt like it was about to take me to a LinkedIn page. I just clicked on Bethesda's main page. So yeah, here you have all these Starfield, and nothing highlights better the split between reality and fantasy in the minds of gamers versus reality and fantasy in the minds of mainstream video game journalists, in that you can easily have what is, let's see, 4 times 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, 49, 56 different mainstream quote-unquote video game journalists give a review to Starfield, and most of them be 10 out of 10s or 95s out of 100s. And then you release Starfield, and the actual reception of players is a general just meh. And certainly a lot of this is just the Bethesda and ZeniMax cherry picking the highest reviews to make this image. But this is 56 examples of bad consumer advice, and 56 examples of, particularly in the case of Starfield, mainstream video game journalists looking at a game for the briefest amount of time when they should be playing probably all the way to the credits, and they should probably rush a little bit, but they should also engage with most of the content, if not all the content. They should play faster but not skip content, ideally. And if these mainstream video game journalists had done that, you definitely wouldn't be getting hundreds. You wouldn't be getting 10s out of the 10s. Yeah. And certainly a lot of that is mainstream video game journalists also just being shills and giving 10s out of 10s to Bethesda just so they can get early access free codes of games. So then more people will look at their websites and look at their ads. It's all about money. Unfortunately, everything gets corrupted by capitalism. GameDeveloper.com says that Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard could conclude on Friday the 13th. Do they really want to end on Friday the 13th? I mean, I guess it probably doesn't matter. Like, they just want to be done with it. So I think they would be more than happy to be Friday the 13th, ended on Friday the 13th, and then never mention that again. It's not like a year from now people are going to say the Activision Blizzard merger concluded on Friday the 13th, 2023, and thus what? It was doomed from the start. Now, I could definitely make an argument that the Activision Blizzard merger is somewhat doomed. Like, yes, these IPs will be in the hands of Microsoft, but there's highly unlikely, in my opinion, going to be a large amount of skilled talent that gets acquired through the merger. I think all the talent, for the most part, has been bled out of Activision Blizzard and King, and you're just buying a bunch of problem employees up to and including Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision Blizzard. And inherently, that's why this whole scheme really feels like this may just be corporate protectionism of one rich white guy effectively protecting another rich white guy who otherwise would have eventually been forced to sell Activision Blizzard or kicked out of his company. Of course, it's not even one rich guy. It's the entire board or cronies for Bobby Kotick. So you're getting a whole board potentially of just rich white guy cronies. People that really aren't going to add much creatively or in any other way to the video to Xbox. That being said, there is a small chance that Bobby Kotick may just know enough politicians that he may be valuable. I mean, this may very well just be a bribe play to keep Bobby Kotick around, because Bobby Kotick rubs elbows with politicians who make the laws and will help the next merger go through or prevent any kind of real censorship happening for video games, which might be worth the investment too. Anyways, Bobby Kotick may be really good at just protecting not only Xbox but Microsoft in general, by having a bunch of rich friends, a bunch of politicians and people in powerful places. He is on the board of several other companies. I don't know if the date has been announced before, but the Game Awards apparently are happening December 7th. I guess good to know. I'll leave it at that. The CD Projekt workers and other Polish developers have unionized under the PGWU, Polish Game Day Workers Union, hopes to improve the employment conditions in the whole industry. Of course, international unions are, to my understanding, not very common. There's just different laws and restrictions there. So we may very well see that the large diversity of where game companies are built and where buildings are set affects how strong of a union, if you have a union at all, a game company may have. And that's 100% intentional. Like, game companies, publishers, and developers were very much considering, when they build their second building, to put it somewhere different in a different country, so you can get cheaper labor, less unionizable labor. Cheaper labor is almost certainly ununionized labor. And yeah, that is something, when people push the ideas of world trade, that never gets mentioned or thought, certainly, is that with the world trade there really should probably be a world unionization effort too, where the Polish German Game Day Workers Union becomes a merger with, say, the Game Workers United, GWA, or SAG-AFTRA in the United States, which even in there, GWA and SAG-AFTRA are fighting. And I do suspect that's what we're going to see, is that we're just increasingly going to see more and more unions, and we won't see mergers in unions for a fairly long amount of time, if ever. Well, Child's Play Charity, I guess, is doing something. I think they once again pushed this idea that Minecraft in particular is good for people who are kids who are actually in the hospital. And they're saying Minecraft here may alleviate symptoms such as pain, boredom, long-term sadness, anxiety, boredom short-term, and cognitive impairment. This whole GameTherapy.org idea is, I think, very unscientifically based, and it just doesn't really mean much of anything. And frankly, when you're talking to the general public here, one would hope that your average kid is not having symptoms of pain or anxiety or cognitive impairment or sadness or boredom, short-term or long-term, in any significant amount that it needs actual therapy. Unfortunately, I probably would say that there probably is a high number of depressed or really on the borderline of being diagnosed as depressed kids that do self-treat with video games, which is better than self-treating with alcohol or drugs or cigarettes. But yeah, if anything, video games might be a danger in that people are self-soothing themselves with things like Minecraft to the point where parents are just not, or caregivers are not recognizing that the person is depressed or anxious, and so the symptoms are being masked potentially by that self-soothing strategy. And generally, I would say a lot of parents are probably, if their kid has anxiety and they're not noticing it, are probably fairly bad parents in the first place, and they're not going to be happy with their kid playing a ton of Minecraft to soothe for anxiety. So they're not going to generally like video games, and they're not generally going to like the idea of people having emotions at all in therapy. So there might be a lot more harm that comes throughout certain scenarios than benefit, to where this really is just a case of Child's Play charity trying to promote itself. It's a charity of PAX, and so yeah, Charity Navigator might have something interesting to say about Child's Play charity anyways. Their overall idea, though, is not terrible. Giving video games to kids in hospitals sounds definitely fine and right, but trying to back end and justify it with some science sounds kind of dumb. Just say, hey, kids like games. If they were in hospital, they'd like games. If they weren't in hospitals, they'd like games. And we're trying to treat these kids in particularly nice because they're in the hospital, so let's give them games. That's the totality of the sales pitch that you really should go with. Don't try to make these arguments, which you've definitely seen these arguments made before, that that people have tried to say certain video games are educational, or that video games help in socialization. And while some of that may be true, it just is surveys and scientific studies that get completely ignored by parents that hate video games. We'll just call them that. And it means absolutely nothing to parents, your average parents that has kids play video games in a reasonable amount, or parents that are neglectful and let their kids play way too much video games in an unreasonable amount. So those kinds of surveys are kind of pointless. Everybody lives effectively, and it's been going on for a lot longer, probably thousands of years, but effectively people live in their own realities. They believe what they want to believe, and no amount of science tends to pull your average person out of their own myopic worldview. And so you either drag people kicking and screaming with Kicking and Streaming would be a good podcast name, actually. You either drag people kicking and screaming through the two modern days, or to reality. You pass laws, you just have to use force effectively, or you just wait until the generations die out, because old people won't change their mind, or most people won't change their mind. Moving on, the appeals court has found that Quantic Dream is in breach of the security obligations over obscene material. And a Paris appeal court confirmed that Quantum Dream was in breach of its security obligations by allowing a practice of sharing questionable photo images, so photo montages. So this is that story of, I assume it was management putting employees' heads on porn stars' body and then sharing it amongst themselves. The IT department finding this, the IT department demanding the people in charge being fired, I think, was their demands. And then once that didn't happen, the IT department going effectively on strike in what may have been an illegal strike, or just refusing to do their job until they got fired. And then they've just been suing Quantic Dream this whole time. Now, is this story directly connected to every other complaint around Quantic Dream? I'm not sure. No, it isn't, because half of the stories I'm thinking about Quantic Dream are actually stories about Ubisoft, a completely different company. So I'm realizing now that my entire understanding of this debacle has merged in my mind, and for probably a year and a half now, I've probably interchangeably thought I was talking about Quantic Dream when I was talking about Ubisoft, or vice versa. This is an interesting way to have an appeals court find against Quantic Dream, saying that they have a security obligation as far as photos being shared. In this case, which sought to investigate Quantic Dream's holding of inappropriate materials shared by employees, the court found the practice manifestly inappropriate in a professional context. So is the idea here the evidence of an employee doing something wrong cannot be saved, according to the Paris Appeals Court? Do you have to delete obscene material if somebody shares like a porn image on your business email? Do you have to delete that immediately, or do you keep it as evidence, or is there some way you can silo it and still keep it as evidence? Seems weird that they're potentially implying you, for security reasons, you have to delete it, and then what, you have evidence in the court in the case of some kind of automated warning email going out instead, which is lesser evidence. Let's see. The proliferation of inappropriate images carries a risk for employees, is what they're saying, who could legitimately be offended by these images. Well, arguably the IT people did see it and were offended, so that did happen, it's believed. And they argued that it was up to the employee, who could not ignore them, to warn them. So maybe it stops at a warning. Maybe if somebody shares inappropriate images through an email, you would have an automated system that would warn the person and then silo that information but keep it as evidence, and then anybody looking at that evidence would be warned duly. How much of a warning do you have to get? However, the incident may not yet be settled, according to the original source, which it's important to point out that the two major French newspapers were actively attacking, I think they were actively attacking Quantic Dream, and Quantic Dream was suing him. But honestly, it may have been the two French newspapers were actively attacking Ubisoft, and Ubisoft was suing them. So, but it may just be generally the case that French newspapers go hard and make huge hit pieces. So we'll have to set all of that aside, because I really just don't know the truth anymore. I've confused the story. It's been going on so long, and GameDeveloper.com is not even the best source that will explain it. This is also a very complicated, long-running story, which GameDeveloper.com is not good at telling complicated, long-running narratives. The court only sided with the former employees opposite Quantic Dream in the legal conflict on the security obligation issue. The appeals court rejected requests for Quantic Dream to face discriminatory harassment charges, and the employees dismissal be annulled, leading to the possibility of further appeals over the issues. So effectively what the court did here is they threw a bone to I think it's the IT department who got dismissed, and saying, yes, Quantic Dream does have this securities obligation, which that's an interesting thought, certainly, as far as security obligations, to protect employees from, warn employees from seeing offensive material. But they threw him a bone in saying yes on the appeals on that, where they've rejected the more important things, where they're saying that, again, I assume it's the IT department, were not discriminated against or harassed, and they were not dismissed inappropriately to the point where they could potentially get any money from that, any larger severance. Yeah, here it says, the material at the center of this has been a subject of years-long litigation of the studio behind Detroit Become Human and Heavy Rain, two games that are actually fairly old now, and this lawsuit almost certainly makes it harder for Quantic Dream to make a new game. The original lawsuit was prompted by a 2017 report of a toxic workplace that alleged employees were subjected to homophobic and sexist images, including one infamous example where the studio founder David Cage's face was superimposed on the body of a male stripper holding the power tool with a sex toy attached. Yeah. A cache of 600 photoshopped images deemed homophobic and sexist by whom, I would ask, is mentioned in the report, apparently created by employees and shared around the office via email. So this may very well be a cache that was created by the IT department trying to potentially set up a way in which they could quit and get some money out of it. I keep saying the IT department, but noticeably here in this entire article actually doesn't say IT department or IT employees. Yeah, Quantic Dream was fined $7,700 over the circulation of offending material, which the studio has appealed. So it's really such a small fine, relatively speaking, and they just don't, I imagine, want to set the precedent there. But yeah, they're pointing out here that there's a French law allowing individuals to take companies to court if they left due to considering themselves a victim of company's actions or culture. The court sided with the former employee at the time, prompting Quantic Dream's appeal at the center of the most recent role. So is it literally one employee? Wow. It's not even an IT department, it's one employee. I want to say disgruntled, but whatever. Yeah. This years-long battle that has been talked about way too much by GameDeveloper.com and basically nobody else is seemingly one employee. Almost every company, I would think, has at least one disgruntled employee or angry employee, let's just say, suing them. Like, if anything, it should happen more often. This whole thing seems very ridiculous. YouTube creators still pathetic in their posting. Most recently, the best way to brainstorm is with others. Click here, all by yourself. This is from yesterday. Click here. Notice while they are getting decent amount of views, they are getting incredibly small amounts of interaction. Yeah, I question why YouTube creators bother to even post if they just don't have anything important to say. Just honestly, that is probably the way to better improve a service like Twitter in the first place, is to say, hey, there's going to be some brand accounts and you're going to follow these brand accounts, but they're going to mostly be response bots. And so when you tweet them, they'll respond to you and talk to you, but they're not really going to just try and advertise in general unless they have something to really say and something to really advertise. And if anything, maybe there should be some limitations on the number of posts that an advertiser can do, or some actual cost or expense for companies to tweet and reach an audience instead of it being free advertisement. Here's that story. It says click the link for the full story here. Is that gonna work? Yeah. So apparently it's been claimed ChatGPT was used to write the Golem apology. The game is the lowest rated release of this year. I think fairly to Starfield's certainly nowhere as bad as Lord of the Rings Golem looked. The question here is, and I imagine we're going to see this happen quite a bit, is we will probably see a lot of people making these claims that ChatGPT was used to write apologies, but I don't really feel like that just deserves to have that much focus, though. It's like, it's important as gamers to focus your rage and maintain your rage, and we shouldn't be angry that an apology was written by ChatGPT. We should be angry that somebody had the gall to make Lord of the Rings Golem in the state it was released in, and that this has hurt the Lord of the Rings series of games, which have never really been as good as they probably should have been in the gaming world. Compare that to the Lord of the Rings movies. Those have been excellently done, very well polished. I don't believe there was a Lord of the Rings movies made before the big ones were made. I know there was a Hobbit cartoon that was made before the Hobbit movies, the live action Hobbit movies were made. But yeah, you're talking 7 movies, and maybe you would make a claim that the Hobbit cartoon is bad, but I'm not sure you'd even make that claim. Whereas I could easily pick out 7 Lord of the Rings based video games, licensed products, and find more than one that was bad easily. Shadow of War, with its microtransactions, had major problems. The Lord of the Rings adventure card game I don't think is quite as supported as it should be, and I don't think it's great. Lord of the Rings Golem obviously is bad. I would say the Lego Lord of the Rings games and the Lego Hobbit games are kind of bad, at least on PC. So yeah, it's just not anywhere as polished as it should be. That was the wrong tab to open. That's the tab I'm looking for. That's the window. So in particular here, since we're on SteamDB, I really need to change my macro so it doesn't bother to open this, because this is really wasteful. You can see that Starfield here is in the 15th spot as far as the 24-hour peak of games, with 104,080 players. If we hover over Starfield, the rating is about 70%, 71,000 positive with 29,000 negative reviews on Steam. So, by that argument, these games should be rated. Starfield should be a 7 out of 10, which, again, that really highlights the difference between what a publisher wants you to see, showing you a bunch of 10 out of 10 reviews from mainstream video game journalists, and what gamers who actually buy the game are reviewing Starfield as. That there's just this wide disconnect, and that is the reason I've made this chart anyways. The chart we'll see in a second is to get a much better idea of what gamers actually want to play and are playing. Even if they're reviewing a game negatively, that's still not at the heart of the matter. If people hate playing a game but still playing it, then that's the game that deserves more attention, because at the end of the day, that's the game that's going to influence the development of future games. There is, I think, a fairly high amount of new players that were a little unhappy with Counter-Strike 2, and Steam, this is a news story that should have been reported on more, effectively cheated by labeling Counter-Strike 2 in the same place as Counter-Strike Global Offensive, because they stole effectively all the positive reviews and the peak player base, all-time player base numbers. So yeah, they're effectively cheating. As far as the pattern goes here, it seems like Starfield is getting a little bit of bump it up, and Team Fortress 2 is getting a bit of bump up, which maybe that might be an indication that CS2, Counter-Strike 2, might be falling down a little bit, although it's still way above the top of the chart, so it's hard to tell. Otherwise, it seems like we're staying fairly stable for most things. It's kind of the challenge here is Baldur's Gate 3 seems to come and go, and Naraka Blade Point seems to go up and down, and Cyberpunk 2077 is now going up and down. It probably will take a week or two before we start to see all these dates crash into each other, and there is a lot of negative space here, which probably does make an argument to change this to a maximum of 700,000 or at least 800,000 and get rid of this blank space. Maybe tilt the dates so that they're slanted. I can do that in the chart. As far as this full list goes, I'm still not sure that this list is depicting things correctly. So this is effectively maybe just a random list of the top 25 or so most played games. So as far as the Steam Next Fest though, yeah, on the front page it's seemingly nothing other than this. So yeah, according to the video, this is curated, but oddly this is actually algorithmic. Then this is curated, and again, I think their division between curated and algorithmic is probably splitting it hairs. And then this obviously is curated, which, yeah, if the Steam Deck TV was going to be announced, it would be right there. And categories here are their own separate smaller versions of the front page. This is algorithmic, this is algorithmic. You can kind of tell too. Games based on the games you play, games based on playing Res Infinite. Discovery queue is algorithmic in the sense it's just going to show you new games. recently updated is algorithmic. This is algorithmic, this is algorithmic. But then some of this, as far as the trending phrase, is curated. Which inherently, if they're going to make that argument that some things are curated and some things are algorithmic, they might as well just label it that way too. Why not just have a Steam recommended little badge or something here? See, this might be curated, but then I'm pretty sure once you get down here past the fold, everything here is going to be algorithmic, and it is very questionable whether it's worth it to go this way and just keep on having your website scroll down and load more and load more. One thing I did realize with UI Vision, when programming things, if you want to get down and scroll down, you have to basically click on something, the lowest thing that it searches, because these JavaScript updated infinite scroll web pages won't actually have the object labeled as an XPath CSS object unless it's close to where your mouse cursor is. So you have to use a function called last to click on the last thing you can find. In this case, for my program, it was click on the word featured, the last instance of the word featured, looking for the next thing that didn't have featured on it, to then go through the process of clicking on those clips on Twitch to make them featured. Which inherently, since I've had to make this macro myself and it can't be automated, I am effectively now could just crown myself clip king of Twitch. Are clips important on Twitch? I don't think so. Probably not. But maybe they will be at some point in the future. But yeah, it's back to that idea of taking ownership. Like, I will own clips in general on Twitch if they ever become important, and I will own the clips in particular of games that do not have categories on Twitch because they are too new. And so if anybody is searching that specific game on Twitch, there's a high chance they will be brought to my clips. That is my hope, at least. I could be very wrong about that. That being said, if you're typing in the name of a game into a search engine, Google for certain, you're going to be pointed towards YouTube videos, not Twitch clips. And even if you were using some other search engine, you're not likely to really have a issue there. You know what I find most annoying here is I'm just infinitely scrolling for kind of no reason. Is that I really wish there was a sale going on right now, and that there was a direct way in which I could say to myself, hey, I know that these games are on sale, so I shouldn't buy anything through the Steam big sale. I mean the Amazon.com Prime big sale. Like, I'd like to compare and contrast my budget there, but yeah, it's not going to happen. So I have to just hope to be able to budget to buy games in a week or two when there is a actual Steam sale going on, and not spend anything or too much. It's always weird when you just have these adult games right on the front page. It's just nothing like that. It's like going into a porn shop, I would assume. It's just immediately you walk into a porn shop and there's going to be sex aids on the shelves and porn tapes on the shelves. It's just like, yeah, that's so different from your average storefront experience. Let's go through the Video Games Chronicle news, but honestly there may not be that much. PlayStation's exclusive Modern Warfare 3 content has been revealed. I think we already talked about that. Last of Us 2 Remastered has been listed on a Naughty Dog's developers LinkedIn. Call of Duty Warzone Mobile has been delayed to spring of 2024. Bethesda has updated Redfall with a 60 frames per second mode, gameplay changes, and more. Switch is getting physical releases for 7 Star Wars game, for a 7 Star Wars game bundle, although I wonder if it's all on one cartridge. Like at a certain level, the cartridges on the Switch are so small, it almost would make sense to just say, hey, you're going to buy this one bundle and we'll put it in one packaging, but we're going to put 7 different cartridges so you can swap and trade with your friends. But a lot of these games are probably pretty small, so I would imagine it is all just one cartridge. Yeah, it's one packaging. It's a shame to say all 7 of those games combined are barely worth $60. It certainly would potentially hint at what a Switch 2 might be like if they created a packaging that could hold, I would assume, 8 or 9 Switch cartridges in it. Kind of makes sense though that we may hit that point where we see things that have at least 2 cartridges in them. It's probably cheaper in bulk to have 2 cartridges made with 2 different games on it than it is to have one cartridge with multiple games on it. But maybe not. It might be cheaper for Nintendo, but then Nintendo may license out the size of the cartridges at different prices. That's what they used to do, at least. So you would see a lot of NES game developers bending over backwards to squeeze their games into the smaller cartridges to save money. We talked about the ChatGPT Golem apology allegation. New details on Satoru Iwata's work on Pokemon Gold and Silver have been discovered. Iwata had been previously credited for including 2 regions in the 2nd generation of games, which it's long been believed that Satoru Iwata was responsible for helping Game Freak fit the Kanto region as well as the Johto region into one Game Boy cartridge of Pokemon Gold and Silver. Here's another story talking about cartridge size, coincidentally. But new investigation suggests that isn't the case. The new video from Did You Know Gaming, which should we really be using that as a source, suggests that data from the Pokemon Gold and Silver actually point to Iwata's work being related to the game's speed. According to the investigation, Iwata's repurposed code from Earthbound for Pokemon Gold and Silver, which made the game run quicker than it did prior to Iwata's involvement. As an interesting deep dive on code programming and things like that. And I wish more game developers would go into those kinds of deep dives, but honestly, programmers are too busy programming to explain what they did. And I would say, as a programmer myself, sometimes I just program things and I forget what I did. I didn't document it well, or if I did document it well, I forgot personally, so I'd have to go back and talk about my documentation. There is a YouTuber who worked on the task manager in Windows, and he's got some videos talking about and showing his code from when he made the task manager, and there's it's quite boring, frankly, even to a programmer, and there's a lot of room for it to not have that much of a deep insight anyways. Particularly when you're programming for windows and making specific things. So I'd imagine Microsoft has very specific style guides and rules on how you program things, whereas two programmers could easily argue for hours on the right way to program something. Otherwise, we talked about Masahiro Sakurai teasing a collaboration with an unknown YouTube channel. October's PlayStation Plus extra games have leaked. Gotham Knights and House of Ashes headline this month's editions. EA Sports Football Club 24 attracted more players at launch than FIFA 23, EA has suggested. The publisher claims 11.3 million people played the new football game in its first week. Which, okay. There is something very nice about the hyper-realistic screenshots you can get out of these football club games, or they've gotten here, but then when you start to get to the face, they're a little too shiny, still feel a little cartoony, and honestly, it probably should just be more cartoony, and they should just focus on making the game a little bit quicker and easier on less of a budget than trying to push it for next level hyper realistic graphics. I don't know if people really care that much. I heard about this thing, and I don't know if this is particularly a new thing or not. I've heard it happening a couple times before, where they took some NFL football game, American football, and on Nickelodeon they replaced all of the football players with Toy Story toys playing football. And yeah, if that is something that's succeeding potentially to have a new generation of kids come back to come back to the idea of watching football, which I think people in general are watching less football these days. Why not do that in video game form too? Like, if Toy Story toys replacing NFL players and the real live action video footage of NFL players works, then why not have more cartoony stylized? I wouldn't say go as far as replacing all the players in the FIFA lineups with Toy Story characters, but you could certainly have a stylized art style that just shows each character, and it would be definitely a room for creativity. Of course, EA has no interest in doing anything creative, but if all of a sudden you had very pretty character cartoonified versions of each of the FIFA players, and each person had kind of a almost caricature of themselves, you could do something creative with that. We have someone called Omen Heart on the chat saying, did I miss the Master Duel game? Yep, you'll have to rewind the video to the first hour if you're interested in that, or watch it later, ideally. Watch the entire stream 3 or 4 times. That'd be very helpful, certainly. Moving on, an advert suggests that The Last of Us 2 Part 2 could be coming to PlayStation Plus, which, okay. Yeah, I guess the race is on now as far as, will we get an announcement of Last of Us Part 2 first, or will we see Part 2 come to PlayStation Plus, then an announcement of a Part 2 remaster? Like, you kind of can't do both at the exact same time, and I would think you would want to sell the remaster first, then release the original version 6 months to a year later on PlayStation Plus. Yeah. I don't know how you can do both, though. That seems conflicting. Moving on to the Gematsu articles. A game called Laika Aged Through Blood for PC has been announced for October 19th. Let's see what Steam looks like here. I was gonna see if there was this is one we've already looked at, way to prevent these from opening new tabs. I don't know if there really is a way though. Like, the problem there is I think Firefox by default always opens new tabs when you click to a different website. So when I'm clicking on the Steam link, I just need to investigate it more, see if there's a plugin, see if I could open new tabs on the left of the old tabs instead of the right. So that would help. This game called Spy X Anna Operation Memories has its first trailer, although weirdly it is still labeled as Spy X Family Operation Diary in this Japanese one. But there is a further announcement that it is actually coming to the West and in English. Also, the Spy X Family anime is still popular enough to justify doing this. If anything, this might be a good indication of how long it takes them to make a video game based off of an anime, and they are potentially getting faster at it. Although, in all fairness, you probably should be able to just copy and paste the 3D animations that you're doing for the anime TV series, because whether they look 3D or not, they tend to be 3D, or at least computer generated. I shouldn't say 3D. I should say you should be able to copy and paste the computer generated animations from the anime and put it in a very quickly made mobile game and have a mobile game out almost day one of a new TV series, or at least day one of a new anime TV series being popular in Japan. One of the games I'm playing is based on an anime TV series that I think probably came out somewhere around 2017 and only had one season in that. So I'm probably way too late to the party as far as playing the game. Which, yeah, having one mobile game end its life and stop being playable does not make me want to play an older game that could end at any point. I want to play something that's maybe a year old at most. Moving on, Warm Snow, animated story trailer and interview with producer Lee Z is available. What does Warm Snow look like? Well, it looks like this, and it's very positive. It looks like it might be a kind of top-down twin stick hack and slash game, and yeah, it's already on the wish list. It's been out since January of 2022. So this is just console releases of the game. This week's Japanese game releases include Forza Motorsport, River City Rival Showdown, and Ryo Sekai, and more. I assume this is Ryo Sekai. Red Dead Redemption, and 10 Hearts. We're getting fewer and fewer digital only announcements as we approach the end of the year. DF Retro, one of the guys from DF Retro, went to Tokyo Game Show, and he didn't really have that much to say about Tokyo Game Show, which is about as much as I felt like I could say around the Tokyo Game Show event too. It just didn't really feel like they announced quite as much as they should have. The game Flashback 2 has a story trailer. This is a sequel to a very old game in Flashback 1, which Flashback itself is a spiritual successor to Another World, if I recall correctly. in the original Flashback. Doesn't look basically anything like this game, obviously, because it's just been so much time. It looks somewhat similar. This might actually be a sequel to a remaster of Flashback. Because I think there may have been a remaster of Flashback also. This is one of those things that's going to have me scrolling down forever looking for it. Microids is a publisher who publishes a decent amount of old games, or little games. I don't know how you'd really describe it. AA games, single A games. Actually, in my mind, in all fairness, I couldn't really describe to you what's the difference between a single A game and a AA game. Like, at a certain point, it would just come down to an unfair split between art styles, and potentially calling every 2D game a single A game by an unfair comparison. Lunar Lander Beyond gameplay trailer is available on Gematsu.com if you want to check that out. Guess this is a new twist on Lunar Lander, or games like that. Game called just Lander. It's not really a game you'd really want to play, but I'll give it a clip anyways. Well, it's not a game I'd want to play. A game called War Hospital has been delayed to early 2024. Like a World War II war hospital, or field hospital, or MASH unit. I don't know if they I don't know if they'd use the phrase MASH. It's an interesting idea, though. If you are trying to get into World War II stories, but you don't want just your standard first-person shooter, this is a different take on it. But almost certainly there's going to be a lot of amputations, a lot of barbaric, by modern standards, medical treatment. And that might be very difficult to play through for a lot of people. A game called Last Train Home launches November 28th. This too feels like it might be a World War II game. Inherently, with Ukraine-Russian war still going on, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people are just not super happy with the idea of playing anything World War II related, or World War I related, or war related in general. There's always been too many war games for my taste anyways. And then you have the standouts, which are like Call of Duty, that basically don't really simulate anything like war, particularly Modern Warfare, or Counter-Strike Go. Same kind of ideas. I wouldn't really consider those being very accurate war games, but Call of Duty almost certainly squeezes out a lot of other war game competitors, but also creates a desire from a lot of game developers to make war game competitors. Moving on, Gematsu says a game called Little Goody Two Shoes launches October 31st. Now, I guess the question is going to come down to, with the Steam Next Fest, are the people who are putting out demos also putting out press releases? Because for the most part, it seems like Gematsu will put out an article if they receive a press release for any game. They seem to not curate at all, which is what I like about Gematsu, compared to Video Games Chronicles or GameDeveloper.com, which doesn't really talk about game releases at all. But if if they are going to put out press releases, that means Wednesday is just going to be a mess of a ton of games being announced. Yeah, that's another thing I was going to try and program, was to get the headlines to space themselves a little bit better, so they'd be slightly smaller font. A game called Yohane the Parhelion Blaze in the Deep Blue has a limited time demo now available for PC. Notice the switching from the Yohane Japanese pronunciation to demos tripped me up there, and I almost said demo instead of demo. Let's see. Yep. Yeah, another game we've already made a clip on, a YouTube short on. So it may be Wednesday has a lot of things we have to look at, but the vast majority of things will have already had a short made. The Coney Island and Earthlock Adventure is the one we haven't made a short on because it would be on the follow list. That's why it's so important to use the follow list as a marker, as an indicator of what I've looked at it. This game is launching November 9th for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series and PC, and then coming later for the Switch. And then Bonsin Nights has been delayed to December 14th, and seems like it's coming out for basically everything. And then Murder Mystery Paradox 15 Years of Summer launches December 2nd in Japan. This is an interesting layout in that you have several people sitting here, and it seems like you're having to question and interrogate them. That would be fairly hard to play this without reading Japanese. I feel like it's a little strange to have so many people sitting so close to each other just to squeeze 4 characters on screen, or 5 characters on screen. Let's see. Yep. This one must be coming to the West in English. Nope. Well, it's on the follow list for some reason, but once it comes out in December, if it doesn't have English support, like right now it says will only support Japanese as a language option. So unless they change their mind on that at some point, then that's really a game that shouldn't be on the fall list. And that brings us to GameDeveloper.com articles, which we probably talked about all of this. Ubisoft deepens its cloud streaming investment with Amazon Luna deal. I saw some reviews as far as Assassin's Creed Mirage, and people were saying they generally liked it as kind of a throwback to the original Assassin's Creed game, but the story is fairly short, and it has a issue that people might complain about, in that the first level and the last level are played in that order, but then there's a lot of middle level content that you can do in any order, which I don't think that's really that big of a thing. Honestly, I don't know if that's something you should complain about at all, because when I think about the first Assassin's Creed game, while there was more of a linear story, the missions you took in the middle could have been rearranged, and it really wouldn't have changed much of the story at all. So giving a player freedom is not a terrible thought. It's just an evolution of being better at making a game work. Particularly in the Assassin's Creed series of games, the original concept of Assassin's Creed was you had to kill several low-level Templars to get to the final boss Templar. So killing them in different orders, like a Mega Man game, is not really a bad idea. Omen Heart says, and I'm back. What did I miss? I don't know when you left, but probably a lot of video game news. But video game news between Video Games Chronicle, Gamatsu, and we're looking at GameDeveloper.com articles now. We already talked about the appeals court finding Quantic Dream in breach of security obligations over obscene material. This is another great example of GameDeveloper.com's biased journalism, yellow journalism here. The appeals court, when you get into this article, which we already got into and talked about it, cited on 2 of the 3 charges with Quantic Dreams, and yet they have put a headline here and made it seem like Quantic Dreams has been judged negatively on the one that it was judged negatively on. They're really overemphasizing that. Like if somebody got into a, say, boxing match and they won 5 out of 6 rounds, well, let's just use the same amount of rounds. If you won 2 out of 3 rounds in a boxing match, you won the boxing match. Court case and so on, exactly like that, but it's a good comparison. You definitely don't have the announcers focusing and talking about the one round you lost. Although this is a terrible example that I should have never tried to use, because honestly, if you won the first 2 rounds of a boxing match then got knocked out in the 3rd round, then you would lose the whole thing, wouldn't you? Yep. So yeah, that's a terrible comparison. Anyways, my point being here, they're burying the fact that the 2 way more important appeals court decisions were in favor of Quantic Dream, and the appeals court basically threw the ex-employee, which now it seems like it really is just one ex-employee, a bone by saying Quantic Dream had a security obligation to warn, it seems, employees that they might see obscene material, which, yeah, I don't know how you really should deal with that in Paris, nor how you would really deal with that as an IT person around the world or in the United States in particular. As an IT guy, I think you probably might have some data retention obligations where you have to keep things, and you probably have some evidence retention obligations where you have to keep things. So you almost would say maybe destroy the original evidence in favor of making a printout and putting it in a file somewhere where it's in a locked case where nobody could see it, a locked drawer, or you quarantine the emails or wherever, however the pictures are being shared, and keep them in a locked zip file. Omen Heart asking, any news on the newest Elder Scrolls game, such as a release date or anything? No. And be prepared for the answer to be no for that for a very long time. What the best I can help you with there is speculation, just pure my own personal speculation, and I can only speculate as much based on my observation of Starfield, since I haven't played Starfield, and Fallout 4, which I haven't played, and Fallout 76. In fact, the most recent game I've played from Bethesda is the Game of the Year version of Fallout 3. But what I have observed in Starfield is I don't think you can have kids there. I could be totally wrong about that in Starfield. I've heard people complaining about putting a med bay in your ship and not being able to use it. I've heard people complaining about the main storyline path in Starfield. The worlds and overworlds in Starfield don't look interesting, and the gameplay mechanics and the grind there don't look great. Starfield is not really a space game where you fly around in space. You just go into space and then fast travel to another location. So it all comes off as a general feeling of kind of lazy development and worse than even what I perceive it as far as Fallout 4. That Starfield is just way worse than Fallout 4, which makes me make a speculation that the next Elder Scrolls game may actually be worse than even Starfield. We hope that's not the case, but it seems like it might very well be the case. The next Elder Scrolls game does have maybe more history to it and a higher demand on its quality, so maybe we'll see some improvement on that aspect. But I don't know if I really fully believe that either. Fallout 76 and its elements and it being a game of service that did not make it into Starfield, so we can see that those ideas did not cross over, so we can probably speculate not very many elements of Fallout 76 would be in the next Elder Scrolls game. Depending on just how long they take to do it, to release the next Elder Scrolls game, gives them either more time to improve the game or just more time to disappoint players when the game is not an amazing game, which I suspect it very possibly won't be amazing. Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath as far as the next Elder Scrolls game. The thing that Starfield is really missing, in my opinion, is that there isn't that unique Dragon Shout Fusru Da type attack in the gameplay. Whereas that was the first, this is something only in Skyrim, it's not in Morrowind type idea. There is problems with the creation engine, which is what I think they use to make Elder Scrolls and Skyrim games, and they really need, Microsoft needs them to force them into probably using the Unreal Engine instead, and honestly Microsoft needs to throw new blood and put somebody new in charge of the Elder Scrolls series in general, and Microsoft just doesn't have a lot of passionate game development teams. They just have a bunch of older, almost want to refer to them as burnout teams. Like, you're not going to make the team at Double Fine make an Elder Scrolls game, and if they did, it probably wouldn't be any better than what Bethesda could do. But they just need to have new blood, new talent, up and coming artists. But yeah, I wouldn't hold too much hope out for Starfield. I mean, the next Elder Scrolls game. It's gonna come out probably way longer than you think, and it will probably not be that amazing. I don't know what you really could do with the Elder Scrolls game too. Inherently, the Elder Scrolls series is a pure role-playing game in a world that does not make pure role-playing games anymore. Now, those are all the negative speculations that I can make from what I've seen. The positive speculations you might be able to make if you're playing Elder Scrolls Online is that anything positive from Elder Scrolls Online very possibly will be in the next Elder Scrolls game. So if you like any part of that, you're possibly in a good position there. Omenheart says, if the next Elder Scrolls game is much worse, that means I'm stuck playing Elder Scrolls Skyrim then. Yeah, that's definitely one possibility, and I think there's definitely going to be competition where the next Elder Scrolls game has to make people who've been playing Skyrim for 15 plus years finally stop playing Skyrim. One of the things I think that they're really dropping the ball on is that there's been no thought whatsoever of remaking the first 3 Elder Scrolls games, which the original Elder Scrolls game was just called Elder Scrolls Arena, I believe, and it barely was anything other than an arena fight. But yeah, you need to full-on reboot the Elder Scrolls series at this point and make some spiritual reboot of Elder Scrolls 1. In the meantime, have a new team work on that and reboot an Elder Scrolls 2 and an Elder Scrolls 3. And then you need a proper, more true to the narrative of Morrowind to be remade, and there's been no talk of remaking Morrowind, which, yeah, there's a lot of people who want Morrowind and Oblivion remade, and there's been no talk there either. Like, as far as the first ones, the ones before Morrowind and Oblivion, you can just call a new game, a completely new game, Elder Scrolls 1. And if that is what they were going to do with this next game, is just full-on reboot the series and not try to remake any of the older games, that kind of could work. Like, they have basically just put Elder Scrolls up on the screen and shown it off, so maybe that is just going to be their attempt to reboot the whole narrative and the whole timeline. But that kind of smacks in the face of how Elder Scrolls games have gone. It's always been a few hundred years in between each Elder Scrolls game, so it'd be annoying to reboot it and that be the main next Skyrim. Is to say, hey, we're going to reset the story and the timeline back to the timeline of Elder Scrolls Arena, the first Elder Scrolls game. But yeah, the game can't possibly live up to its hype. It just can't. And honestly, I think it will fall harder than the Final Fantasy games even have fallen. In that, at least in the case of Final Fantasy, Square Enix has pushed out a new Final Fantasy every couple years, and it's had some success just by experimenting over and over again, whereas Bethesda really hasn't done that. Moving on, so we can actually finish this in less than 4 hours as far as the stream. Apparently developers at Avalanche Studios are unionizing. Over 100 employees at the studio behind the Just Cause series and the upcoming Contraband are joining a Swedish union. So we've had a Polish unionization and a Swedish unionization movement. It's interesting to have GameDeveloper.com have a subheadline here saying nothing to lose but your chains, which is straight up pro-union propaganda. Not that I'm anti-union in any way, but maybe you should write your articles in a more neutral tone, even if you do really not have a neutral tone as GameDeveloper.com. It's kind of in your URL that you're supporting the developers, not publishers or management. Virtuous Studios is seemingly closing the Caliphate 1 year after opening it. Update here is Virtuous Studios has confirmed it's shutting down the San Francisco-based subsidiary Caliphate just 1 year after it opened its doors, which that's a pretty big failure there to shut something down a year. Of starting it. Yeah, particularly since if you started a new subsidiary a year ago, I mean, you probably are just hoping and betting that the COVID pandemic was completely done and everything was going to get back to normal way better, and that's just far too big of a gamble to really have and make. Alright, I'm going to leave it at that since Virtuous is a studio I've heard of, but Caliphate, I may be pronouncing it wrong, is not one. And then here's the story of CD Projekt workers and other Polish devs unionizing under the PGWU. Dredge has smashed its internal expectations after topping 1 million in sales. I guess Dredge might be an example of a game that you would call a single A game. But even at that, I don't know why I would say call that a single A game instead of a double A game. I probably just need to look up what other people's definitions of double A and single A and triple A are to better confirm my understanding of it if I'm going to use those phrases. Honestly, they may be fairly useless phrases anyways. EA Sports FC nets 11 million players in the opening weekend. Now, you can see they are intentionally putting out screenshots here of the back of people's heads because the front facing angle of half of these FIFA or half of these players just don't look right. And we already talked about Lord of the Rings Golem devs describing an alleged hostile work culture. And then that's going to bring us to the Steam fall list cleanup. And let's see. Here we have an adult game called Human Farm Rehabilitation, which, yeah, 2D, more Western cartoony comic book art styles of giant-breasted ladies being turned into cows and being milked effectively. Well, not really turned into cows, being treated like cows and being milked. And it looks like it's really an RPG Maker simulation game, like real-time strategy, resource management type game. This is one that I wanted to see if it was going to have a good reception, since it is kind of a weird fetish as far as human cows or human farm. And yeah, 85% of 82 reviewers said yes. It is $8.99, supports English, Japanese, and Chinese, and seemingly it is also trying to be involved with the Steam Next Fest, or at least the publisher is. Right, so that's an example, I guess, of something I could say yes to, but also something I don't really need to buy. That was on the fall list exclusively just for research purposes. Human Fall Flat 2 apparently is to be announced. Not ready to say anything here. Human Constructor VR is from 2020. It's a VR anatomy thing. Kind of an interesting idea, but I think at this point I'm not going to keep just interesting ideas if they're not relevant games or if they're VR games. So that's going to leave the fall list. Here we have a game called Hubris, which is mostly negative at 38% and was only at 74% here as far as a VR game. So I imagine maybe it doesn't have any continued support for it. You could try and see what the most recent reviews are saying. Game is okay, but not worth trying to fix the broken WMR controls for. I don't know what that is. Well, yeah, I really am at the point though where I'm just gonna start removing VR games anyway, so we can start now with this one. Let's see how to hack in. Needs more time. House of the Soul. I think we can probably say no to. It's from February and it only has 5 user reviews, so it's just not relevant enough. House Flipper 2, it's not out yet. Hotel Rock and Roll. Here is very positive, but it is a VR game. I guess I'll leave that on the follow list. Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 Turbocharged does definitely make a weird situation where maybe you don't buy Hot Wheels 1 because it had its own problems. Real question is just going to come down to if there's actual in-app purchases in the second game, or if this is a case where Hot Wheels 2, Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 is going to try and just move to the second game in a potential series and undo a lot of the negative press it had from its, I think, weird monetization that I think it had. Of course, I could be thinking of Disney Speedstorm instead of Hot Wheels Unleashed. I'd have to see if we can find Hot Wheels Unleashed. And that is one thing that the Steam algorithm is still really bad at. It's just not an easy way to link to the first games, and they're doing it intentionally. They don't want people buying the first game in the series when they're trying to get as many sales as possible for the second game. Best I can do is say click here and scroll down here. Yeah, Hot Wheels Unleashed 1 is already on the wish list, and it doesn't have any in-app purchases. It does have, however, quite a lot of DLC that's fairly expensive, so I could see them getting away from that. Although if you could get the Game of the Year edition on sale for half price, I mean, that still would be $44. That's still a little too expensive. Hot Pot for One was a cooking sim game that I wanted to succeed whenever I see a cooking sim game, but you can see the reviews are not good, so that'll leave the follow list. And then Hot Lap Racing hasn't come out yet, so we'll leave that on the fall list. And then that brings us to all the new games on Steam. So let's see what Steam has got for us today. We have a side-scrolling RPG called Draw, which we'll give a chance to. We have something called Float, which looks like it's a tower defense game, but it has enough of a difference that I'll give it a follow. We have a choose your own adventure text interactive fiction game, which I think we can say no to. We have our first adult game that's new called Making Memories. 3D CGI lady with dark skin and big, somewhat big boobs. Not really even that big of boobs. On the scale, I would say maybe C or D cups, not gigantic G cups. I would assume that this is just a visual novel of rendered scenes, a couple ladies, maybe a guy or two. $7.19 yeah, it looks like one guy and two ladies, English only. Yeah, and I would assume that there's just no gameplay here at all. It's so hard to kind of judge these kinds of games too, because they all look so similar and they're all from either 2 or 3 of the same publishers. Like, the diversity is incredibly low as far as adult games, and it really is just comparing an apple to an apple to an apple, slightly different size and shapes, and that's about it. This Vosphia doesn't look good based on the reviews, so I'll say no to that. This Osagos might be an interesting point and click, so I'll give it a chance. Soul Seeker doesn't look like anything. Horn Sounds doesn't look like anything. 1 Week is a post-apocalyptic world of exploration and survival, building, crafting, and farming. So it's a Terraria clone, sorta, I guess. Which, knowing Terraria is a 2D version of Minecraft clone. Yeah, I'll give it a chance. Now, maybe I'm too generous on how many YouTube shorts, how many games get YouTube shorts. Survival Dead Polly, though, is not going to get one. Maybe every time I say I'll be generous, it should be the point where I stop making shorts and maybe just put it on the follow list. Yeah. If I was more strict on what got a short and less strict on what got on the follow list, that definitely could work. Where I am just actively kind of trying to find a way to curate without also censoring, which basically there's no way to actually do that at some point if I am injecting more of my personal opinion as I'm curating on styles of games versus just the quality of games. That is going to play a role. That's going to be censorship. Here we have another 3D CGI adult game called Sex Apocalypse 2. Looks like there's zombies in this one, and that there's actually probably an asset flip zombie shooting game. Seems like you play as the lady in leather. She has a ridiculously thin waist size, an hourglass figure. It almost feels like almost like Left 4 Dead mod or clone, which honestly I'm a little surprised we haven't seen something like that. I'm not even seeing a guy in this game at all. It's rated very positively already, with 96 reviews. But yeah, I'm a little surprised that there isn't a mod out there that would just be a reskinning of something from like Left 4 Dead and sold on Steam. Well, I could definitely see why this game is very positively reviewed, because in the few screenshots where it's actually showing gameplay, it looks like a standard third-person over-the-shoulder shooter game, not a first-person shooter. I should just use the phrase shooter and avoid making those mistakes. It also says it supports 30 languages with full audio in English. The problem, though, with this is it still has that separation where I don't think the nudity and adult stuff really connects in any way to the third-person shooting, zombie shooting stuff. And it really would need that level of integration to justify the adult content for me to even think for a second I could show it off or play it. Which, yeah, I still don't know of any place where you could potentially make that kind of footage and show it off for the select audience that would even want to see that kind of footage. Record books here as a game I don't think looks too much. Photorealistic body cam first person shooter as you play as a secret agency agent. What's the point of doing photorealistic or claiming photorealism, which I would say I don't really feel like these screenshots look 100% photorealistic anyways. Yeah, what's the point of realism when you're going to be playing as a secret agent whose duty is to solve complex and mysterious cases of your duty area? Yeah. Overall, I just don't think this game looks that interesting. So I'm going to say no. Let's see. Thyria, Step into Dreams. I'll give a chance to. Last Lesson. It's tagged as a walking simulator. It looks like it's just an asset flip horror game, so I'll say no to that. Space Doggo. I think I have to say no to this as a side-scrolling shooter. It's just a bad color palette as far as the characters not standing out from the background. Here we have Rising Dead, which is trying to create name confusion as far as Dead Rising game series, and is just ripping off Dead Rising and doing a way worse job at it. Although it does highlight how if you were to try and remake the Dead Rising concept of being trapped in a mall and fighting zombies, you could do it with much more realistic visuals, but with the more realistic visuals you're likely to have fewer zombies that you can put on the screen and have a good frame rate on, and I don't think that really improves the experience by much. If anything, the thing to fix Dead Rising is to make the game a little bit easier and probably a little bit shorter, not harder. One would assume that there should be a flag when you put Hitler in your name in a Steam Direct listing, but apparently that doesn't stop these games from getting released. Hitler is my crash. Here is obviously a troll joke garbage game, so that's going to be no to that. Or something like Chicken Brother here might be something. It looks like it might be a joke game, but it has a level of polish on it that maybe means the joke is actually worth checking out. Here we have a block puzzle game. Tetris clone by the looks of it. I saw a Tetris clone game where the pieces would look like Tetris pieces to start with, then when they got to the bottom they would just break down into like piles of dirt and have physics on them, which I have no idea how you'd actually make a full line that way, and I don't think that really makes the game better in any way, but it was an interesting twist on Tetris, whereas almost every other Tetris game that I've ever seen is very basic and too simplistic for its own good, and not something that really should be on a professional consumer level website like Steam. Wicked Times here. Looks like it's probably a, what are they calling it? RPG Manager Auto Battler. Now weirdly, Auto Battlers aren't very prevalent on Steam, but I guess that kind of makes some sense too, because why would you on your PC commit to an auto battler happening, or would you even really have the idea of running an app that would take up a full screen of your computer, whereas auto battlers make a lot more sense on cell phones because you go back to your desktop and switch apps like crazy on a cell phone. So looking at this tag of auto battlers, not really recognizing any of these games. And I don't know if any of these are really that interesting. This For the Queen adult one might be something to check out. I'm not recognizing any of these games. This is another idle nudity game, which, yeah, idle games and auto battlers and adult content really do go hand in hand, no pun intended. But generally speaking, PC gamers probably want more interaction than that. Noticeably, there's just not that many games under the auto battler tag. I imagine there's a lot more under the idle tag. Moving on with new games, First Steps here doesn't look like anything of interest. Educational Suite here looks too simplistic to be something I would want to suggest. We are very lackluster in educational software on Steam, but inherently I think that's just because educational software that's really good probably sells itself for a lot more directly to teachers through different avenues. It doesn't even really make a lot of sense for people to potentially have to install the Steam client to install a Steam program when the Steam client has the possibility of adding so many other games that are not educational. So it makes a lot of sense for educational software to be individual and not have Steam DRM in them. That being said, also I imagine most educational software even now is pretty garbage. Most educational software also should probably just be a website. Like you're not really needing to reinvent the wheel there. Websites inherently should be educational on some topic in a lot of cases. They tend these days not to be, but there's some level of that. Tank It Totes doesn't look like anything. Survival Nexus doesn't look like anything. Guerrera Sagrada, I'll give a chance to. And they really are trying to keep me tongue-tied today. Scarecrow 2 looks like absolute garbage. Although it does kind of highlight, of all the Five Nights at Freddy's games, there aren't a lot of female presenting scary characters. They tend to be much more the Exorcist style monster female characters. I know there is at least one female Five Nights at Freddy's monster, but I think that the ratio is nowhere close to 50-50. I imagine what is going to happen though is for the rest of the year we're going to get a lot of garbage games getting released and very few good games. We have a game here called Goddess Detective 3, which is one of these Chinese implied porn games that don't really have porn and instead just have the girls in bikinis, and it's just an asset flip of mostly the back of a lady in bikinis walking around. selling this as early access for $1.43 is nothing worth mentioning at all or looking into. Yeah, it is a little weird. Of all the countries that have some level of censorship in the Asian countries as far as adult content, the blurring in Japanese porn has led to severe fetishes and extreme in manga and anime in particular being very popular in adult formats, whereas Korean has gone in a similar fashion. In Korea, porn is illegal, so there's a lot more lewd activity and a lot more K-pop band worship and fan fiction, I imagine. But in China's case, porn I think is severely frowned on. Maybe it's not exactly illegal, but it's just led to a lot of bikinis. There's not that much more creativity to it, at least so far as what we've seen from these Chinese games. Although in all fairness, China's problem with video games is mostly that they're just decades upon decades behind the times as far as making good video games, and until we have a whole new generation of game developers spring up in China and the Chinese government allow them to make video games, that's going to constantly be the problem. This game is not even in English, so obviously it's going to be a no. Earthcart looks like nothing. A drift program. Time management game, it says. I'm just not seeing enough here in the screenshots to say yes to that. Storm Shot is a bullet bouncing game, 100 levels of shooting. Does this have in-app purchases? Yes, it does. Well, if it didn't have in-app purchases, I might say yes to this, because it's not the worst polish ever for visuals, and it is just one of these mobile games you see in ads that very possibly has very little of this happening and way more of, where is it? This happening, resource management and multiple currencies and stamina. Yeah, that's got to be a no. We still really haven't seen any good argument for a lot of these mobile games to come to PC if they aren't even that good as mobile games. Spot the Difference 3D. I'm gonna say no to that also. At a certain level, hidden object games and spot the difference games and resource management games in general might just be categories I'm gonna have to heavily curate and censor, just because there's too many of them, and if you really wanted them, you could just search them out. Leap to the Top. A black and white game where you're basically playing Jump King does not improve the situation by any means. Like, it's just going to be way worse than the experience, so I'm going to say no to that. Yep, solitaire game here with Cthulhu storyline around it. It's nothing. Escape the Dark Tower. Now this might be actually a really old game, or it might be brand new. I'm not sure. Like, I kind of feel like I've seen this game before. 15 rooms with puzzles. Escape the Dark Tower is the first published work of the solo developer. It's a short game estimated in a total time of 40 minutes for $3.59, which is too expensive. It doesn't look terrible. So, you know what? I'm going to put it on the follow list just to see if people like it, but I'm not going to make a short around it. And I guess I haven't seen this game before, but I probably have seen games that look very similar to this. And then of course there's the Stephen King Dark Tower book series. You really didn't have a lot of adult games today. It's about 3. And yep, that may also be a case of what happens throughout the rest of the year. Although maybe this weekend, holiday weekend, might be affecting things too. We're almost done. This one I don't think supports English, so we can't do anything with this. This is a werewolf card game, which is an interesting question as far as werewolf card game. In a digital format in the first place, and I'm not sure if anybody actually plays werewolf as a card game. The werewolf I'm thinking of is you hand out cards at random to certain people, and then you start accusing people with very little rules or rhyme or reason around it. They play it and show it off in Only Murderers in the Building on Hulu in an earlier season, the previous season. And yeah, while they do it for dramatic effect in that, it really highlights how the game isn't a smart concept if it is actually played that way, where you're just accusing people at your party in a game format, but really that's about it. It's too hostile of a game, at least in the case of Clue. Like, you might be the killer in Clue, but you have actions and other things you're doing instead of just talking. And there's a game I think called Secret Hitler, a similar idea of werewolf, but I think that too has maybe more gameplay mechanics to it. But in this digital format, I just don't know what this adds, if it adds anything. And if this art style was better, maybe I'd be more interested in that. Of course, it really does come down to the question again as to whether you couldn't just play werewolf on Tabletop Simulator if you wanted to play werewolf. Next we have Land of Vikings, which is out of early access and now at the 1.0 release. So I could question whether I want to put this on the wish list or not, but you know what, I'm just going to leave it on the fall list and decide later. And then we have Rich Teddy here. Does this have in-app purchases? No. Yeah, free game with a ton of currencies. I think that's going to be a no. So that's going to be it for this episode. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some info down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.